Welcome everyone to the October UTRCA regular meeting, October 22nd, 2024. I'll call the meeting to order at 9:30 a.m. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Okay, see none. As a reminder, Amy Bambaco is serving as our meeting host. So if there are those of you online have connection problems or issues with technology, please contact Amy through the chat feature. Also, today's meeting is being live streamed through the UTRCA's YouTube channel. Please refrain from whispering and side conversation while the meeting is running, as they could get picked up by the microphones. When the squares are glowing red, the microphones are muted, and as they are right now, they are green, so they are on. If you are a board member attending online, please have your camera on during the meeting, especially during voting. And that's specifically important today. We are short of board members. There's 4 of you online today and 2 away. Skylar and Anna have shown their regrets, or have given their regrets. So Yes, if, just to make it easier for me to share the meeting, if we could have those on, so I make sure I can see you, that would be great. I will now read the territorial greeting. Just before we do that, I do want to thank Dean for chairing the last meeting. Thank you very much. I had planned to attend, not chair, but attend, but that got sidetracked by another agenda. So thank you very much, Dean. Welcome. Well done. We will begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenape peoples who have longstanding relationship to the land, water, and region of southwestern Ontario. The local First Nation communities of this area include Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, Munsee Delaware Nation, and Moravian Town. In the region, there are 11 First Nation communities and a growing Indigenous urban population. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and all the original people of Turtle Island. Are there any modifications to the agenda? I do believe we do have to have a motion to add 7.2 to the closed agenda according to section C12. Sandy, are you willing to make that motion?
Yeah, in case it needs to be notwithstanding policy, we can let that.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to make the motion.
And that would be to discuss advice that is subject to solicitor and privilege in regards to land lease negotiations. Is there a seconder for that? Paul, discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. So now I have asked for declaration of pecuniary interest, but I'll do so again. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Excellent. And we'll go right into presentation and delegations. And we have one for environmental and climate change program. Tracy.
Yeah, I'll just do a little bit of an introduction here. We're talking about the UTRCA grant application for some time in the federal program for reducing phosphorus in our Great Lakes ecosystem. I just wanted to introduce Tatiana, who will be giving the presentation today, but also recognize her efforts. Certainly it was a lot of collaboration to put this project proposal together and also stems from some of the long-standing relationships that some of our senior managers have had with Environment Climate Change Canada staff over the years that became evident that conservation authorities were a great delivery agent for this program. We also heard from staff from the federal department reviewing the applications that once the Upper Thames application was reviewed, it became the standard in which to test all other applications against. So big kudos to Tatiana and her work on pulling that all together. Many staff were involved in putting and providing input into this application, but just wanted to give some recognition to Tatiana for pulling that together. So thanks, Tatiana. I'll hand it over to you to give a little bit of a program presentation and overview.
Thanks, Tracy. So I am happy to, with 100% confidence, talk about the federal funding, that it's actually changed from Environment and Climate Change Canada to being delivered through the Canada Water Agency now. So just as we go through things, there's just that difference, but that doesn't affect anything that I'm gonna present today. So we did have two projects that were funded through the Great Lakes Freshwater Ecosystem Initiative, one being through the Lake Erie Precision Conservation Substream and the other through the Lake Erie Innovation Substream, both tied to reducing phosphorus loading in Lake Erie. So I'm going to briefly review what we've proposed under both of those programs. On the next slide. So under the Lake Erie Precision Conservation Program, there's 3 deliverables. One is to increase on the ground implementation of phosphorus reduction measures or best management practices, following a precision conservation approach to target implementation, to monitor the progress through targeted sampling, and to create outreach and education opportunities. So through this funding program, we did secure $17.4 million through till the end of March 2028. And I'll walk through what those 3 separate components look like. So on the next slide, so we have to have a targeted approach in how we meet the precision conservation objective of the program. And overall, the program is going to focus on stewardship efforts in the rural parts of the watershed, given the large percentage of agricultural land and that being a large non-point source of phosphorus losses across our watershed. So we took a multi-scale approach in how we feel we can meet that objective while being able to enhance stewardship opportunities across the watershed. So we're going to prioritize not only locations of the watershed, but also types of projects. So the first objective was to prioritize the implementation of BMPs in areas of our watershed that are contributing the highest to phosphorus loss. So using the provincial water quality monitoring data, Gregory, North Mitchell, and Reynolds Creek subwatersheds were identified as 3 subwatersheds that are showing increased phosphorus trends over time. So here we're using the long-term data trends to target stewardship efforts to reduce phosphorus. So really just going to be looking at opportunities to bring that trend line back down in these subwatersheds. Also on the map is in yellow there is the Upper Medway. So this has been a priority subwatershed with a water quality and stewardship component since 2016. So really, we're going to have about 12 years of information of stewardship of water quality monitoring by the end of this project. So we felt, just given the number of partner projects that have been involved in this area, it's really important to continue this on through this programming. So really hoping to continue kind of the upward momentum of stewardship adoption and also having that water quality component to it. We're also going to prioritize BMP adoption across the watershed in areas that are highly vulnerable to soil loss, because we know that a large part of the phosphorus loading in our watershed is tied to soil loss. So that could be our highly erodible slopes, highly erodible soils. And we're also going to look at the opportunity to work in areas of our watershed that have high soil phosphorus levels. So one example could be working with livestock farmers to help reduce those phosphorus levels in fields throughout the timeline for this program. And lastly, although we can identify subwatersheds where the data is showing that they're increasing in phosphorus trends over time, we do know that all of our tributaries contribute to phosphorus loading in the Thames, and that loading is cumulative as you move from the headwaters to the outlet. And so with non-point source phosphorus being about 85% of the phosphorus loading in our watershed, primarily agricultural lands, we felt it was important to also include a component where we can have a broad program for all agricultural lands in our watershed. So within this, to meet that precision conservation objective, we're going to emphasize the adoption of practices that have been proven to reduce phosphorus. And really, given the landscape of our watershed, this allows us to continue what we've already been doing in stewardship. So whether that's erosion control, windbreaks, cover crops, but also an opportunity for new funding and new programs, such as subsurface fertilizer applications or opportunities to draw down high phosphorus level fields. So really focus more on the source of phosphorus, where historically we've focused on reducing the transport component, so reducing runoff and reducing erosion, which is still going to be equally important and part of our core services. Some of the prioritization, so how we go about prioritizing areas of the watershed, will also come from working with the University of Guelph and using the modeling information that they've put together for our watershed to help guide priority areas. So they've put together a model that's looking at phosphorus potential across our watershed. So we'll be working with them to incorporate that in some capacity through this project. And then also using internal expertise and how our water moves across our watershed, the watershed characteristics, and then working with the landowners in our watershed to also pivot how we prioritize stewardship efforts. So to do all of this, we're going to be developing a new cost share program that's going to aim at reducing financial risk to farmers that are going to be adopting the practices that we're promoting. So while we're delivering on a conservation precision piece using best available information, we do recognize the opportunity to deliver collective effort to support agricultural producers across our watershed. So we have filled the agricultural stewardship specialist position to support both the technical assistance and the delivery of this program. And Chris Van Esbroek is just sitting at the back of the room and has taken on that role with us. So on the next slide, the second component is the water quality monitoring piece. So monitoring through targeting sampling. So one way we're going to do this is continue monitoring at the Upper Medway. So we have recognized that we really need to refocus looking at the water quality that we have collected at that site, because we haven't really taken a deep dive into what that data is able to tell us about the adoption of stewardship in a small area and how that links to water quality. Having long-term information in this area is going to be really important as we progress with this project. And really overall, long-term data is needed to tease out the complexities of the environment and start to look at opportunities for understanding what's happening in water quality as it relates to stewardship. And really that long-term data piece is why the Provincial Water Quality Network is a really powerful data set. But through this program, we're actually hoping to supplement it in a few different ways. So one will be to utilize the locations that are sampled under the Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Program in North Mitchell, Gregory, and Reynolds to create a more robust data set. The data set will be enhanced through increasing sampling frequency, so sampling in between what our regular sampling program is, and hoping to catch more event-based sampling or runoff events during the non-growing season, so from April to October, which we know is a really critical time for phosphorus loss. And our PWQMN, or Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Program, sometimes misses those data gaps, especially when we haven't made efforts to fill in that time period. The second part to this is also going to be to enhance sampling across the PWQMN sites within the watershed to create a more comprehensive data set overall. So we're going to focus on other sites that we currently sample where there's stream gauges in place, because to understand phosphorus loading, we really need to have that flow component. So we use the same methodology as the sub-watersheds, capturing more samples within the year. But this will really allow us to understand and quantify phosphorus across the watershed and also help identify and prioritize areas where maybe we've underestimated phosphorus loading historically. And so although we're going to prioritize 3 sub-watersheds and kind of work through the motions that I had just previously discussed, we do have the opportunity to pivot a little bit as we start to piece the puzzle together. And this program is potentially 10 years. So we're really hopefully setting ourselves up for not only increased momentum in stewardship adoption, but able to put those pieces of the puzzle together to better understand phosphorus losses across our watershed in general. And then on the next slide, the last component is the education and outreach. So we are aware that the phosphorus conversation has been a bit on the back burner for the last couple of years. So we really need to refocus that conversation as we begin to promote this program, while also making sure that we're promoting the co-benefits of phosphorus reducing practices. So whether that be carbon sequestration, habitat creation, biodiversity, for example. So we'll be working primarily with the agricultural producers within the identified sub-watersheds, but also across the watershed to meet those different target objectives. We'll be partnering with farm organizations to not only focus on the phosphorus messaging, but to deliver on the stewardship programming. We'll be working with watershed residents as well. So although we're focusing the stewardship program on agricultural lands, we do recognize the phosphorus issue is a collective issue. So we don't want to lose sight of the urban contribution in the overall messaging of phosphorus and how we go about reducing phosphorus loading in the Thames River and Lake Erie. And then also we want to work really closely with students, primarily rural high school students and those next generation farmers. But we're looking for opportunities to include phosphorus and rural stewardship into environmental learning overall. One of the components with this funding is that our neighboring CAs in the Lake Erie Basin also received funding. So there's an opportunity here for joint promotion of our individual stewardship practices, joint messaging when it comes to phosphorus and what that means for our various watersheds in Lake Erie, joint workshops. And then there's also an opportunity that we're hoping to kind of capitalize on with joint programming. So we recognize that there is an opportunity to offer very similar cost share categories and funding rates between the CAs, which I know has not always been the case, and especially for those lands that maybe drain partly into one and partly into another, it's nice to have a little bit more of a cohesive programming. So at the very high level, that's kind of the ends of what we've proposed under the Precision Conservation Funding Program. So we have hired 2 staff. So Chris being one to support the delivery of the project, and then we have a agricultural outreach specialist starting tomorrow to help support the education and outreach component of the program, because we suspect it will be a very large component of the next 4 years. So the next steps for us are launching a program ASAP and working on winter meetings and promoting. So it's a really exciting and a really busy time ahead for us. And then really quickly on the next slide, I just wanted to introduce the innovative projects. So these are more specific from a delivery standpoint. So under this funding stream, we received $850,000, again, through that same timeline to the 2028, where we'll demonstrate innovative best management practices for reducing phosphorus. So one being continuing work on the Thorndale demonstration farm, where we've been looking at controlled drainage. And the second is a new demonstration farm being installed near Wildwood, which is a subsurface drainage recycling project. And Amy, if you just flip to the next slide, it's hard to kind of conceptualize what's happening underground. So I just wanted to put these two diagrams in there really quickly. So with controlled drainage, we're holding water back in the tiles in the subsurface drains. And with the subsurface recycling project, we're closing that loop. So we're pumping water back into the field and reusing it. So hopefully by having these two projects in place, we can start to tease apart BMPs that work on the subsurface drainage portion of how we lose phosphorus in our watershed. Drainage is an important pathway for water and phosphorus to move from agricultural fields to the Thames River and ultimately to Lake Erie. And then just back on the previous slide, Amy, two other components for this is one, looking at legacy phosphorus drawdown. So trying to understand the timelines of drawing down phosphorus levels in fields with high soil test phosphorus results. And then water quality monitoring, again, just to gap fill our data sets, because as we go through the motions, we'll probably realize what we might be missing. So just making sure that we have a bit of a buffer to pivot and fill some of the data gaps that come up. So really the pieces and components of this project tie into the precision conservation from a lessons learned and a research standpoint, which is really nice. So hopefully we can use this again if it does end up being a 10-year program to inform how we move forward in the next phase. So that is all I have. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
So what I'll say is obviously this is a huge program. Obviously the target phosphorus reduction in the Thames River and Lake Erie. You heard a little bit about it. There's a lot going on there. If there's any questions for clarification today, but that'd be great. But what I would also recommend is there's going to be questions going forward, and certainly Tatiana may not be able to answer all those because the program isn't out yet, but they're working on it, right? So make sure you write down those questions as well and send them in to staff. And I'm sure we'll be hearing more about this, but I know Mark has his hand up, so Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess my question is more just of curiosity. That Thorndale demonstration farm that we saw, is that the specifically same farm we toured as the board on the bus tour, whatever that would have been a year ago or so?
It is.
It is?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, just curious who initiated this? Was this staff identifying that this is type of work needed to be done and then went looking for funding? Or was it the feds saying, we have money available, how do you want to use it?
Yeah, so the initial conversation was actually the federal government coming to Upper Thames and Lower Thames actually in a meeting, and without really too much information, it was just a general conversation about what opportunities could be out there to target BMP adoption, to reduce phosphorus loading in Lake Erie. So it was really a conversation to start, and that was probably almost 2 years ago now. And so once the call for letters of intent came out, then really the details of what they were looking for were in that, but it was really up to the individual conservation authorities to define what that meant for them. So the precision conservation, although there's objectives to meet, it's flexible in terms of what we think that means for our conservation authority and how we want to deliver that program.
So the upper level government provided an opportunity and we're taking advantage of that opportunity to do work.
Yeah.
Sandy.
Yeah, through the chair, I mean, this is a long-standing issue. I mean, the International Joint Commission's been trying to reduce phosphorus in the Great Lakes for a long time. And there's two areas that we don't have any control over. One is the Maumee River in Ohio. And the other that's not really within our purview is municipal sewage water. So are you aware, and you may not have an answer, but are there any programs municipalities can tap into to reduce their phosphorus loading?
I believe through this program, there was an opportunity for municipalities to apply through there was a couple different funding streams. Yeah, and I guess really with this program, we're looking at the Thames River as a priority river for loading on the Canadian Lake Erie side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't do anything about the Americans. Okay, thank you.
Thanks through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thanks Tatiana for the excellent presentation. West Perth was proud to provide a letter of support for this program. So I guess my comments would be to encourage you. You mentioned contacting groups within the ag sector. So I guess my comment would be to encourage you to contact Grain Farmers of Ontario, as well as Ontario Bean Growers Association, plus the 3 general farm organizations, the Federation, and as well as Christian Farmers and National Farmers Union. But I highlight the grain growers and or the grain producers and or grain farmers. I gotta get the title right. Grain Farmers of Ontario and the bean growers, because that's your high volume users of phosphorus is in grain farming and bean farming. So this looks like it'll be a great program. So it's excellent. Thanks.
And if I could just add a comment, Grain Farmers did actually provide us a letter of support as well. So I had a conversation before the letter of intent went in, and just generally speaking, what we are thinking of doing from a delivery standpoint. So that's the other side to this, is there going to be a whole program behind this and the types of EMPs that will offer. So that was a conversation. They were able to provide us a letter of support, as well as some of our local chapters, Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association. So we'll certainly be looking to attend winter meetings to make sure that we're sharing what we're putting out there.
That's great to hear that, because the industry is cognizant of the issue and everyone's working at it from different angles to address the problems. So address the challenges and come up with solutions. So that's great that cooperation and partnership's already there. Thanks.
Mark, I see your hand up. Is that residual or is that new?
No, I do have a new question there, Chair.
Go ahead.
I guess more of a geography question. You talk about the Thames River and of course Lake Erie. We've seen lots of news stories on algae blooms, etc. Just wanted to know how Lake St. Clair fits into this whole thing, being that it's such a shallow lake. Is there any kind of a stopgap area, or is it part of the problem because it's so shallow as far as water movement towards Lake Erie? Just curious on that.
Yeah, so the Sydenham is also a priority river for targeting phosphorus reduction, and St. Clair Conservation Authority also has funding. So they'll be delivering a very similar program, and we'll have this similar goal at the end of the day.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Can we just get a motion just to receive the presentation? George, and signed by Scotty. Discussion? I guess in that, I just want to say thank you very much. This is huge. Like, I don't think we want to lose the dollar figure here or what this means on the ground to be able to produce these $17.4 million multi-year contracts do not come along very well. And by the sounds of it, staff had an integral part in developing really what this program is going to look like. So something to be proud of from the authorities' perspective of being leaders in this. So congratulations. And I think the board looks very much to hear more about this. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Great way to start off a meeting. We'll move to administrative business, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, September 4th, 2024. Is there a mover and a seconder for that? You to move. Yeah, Jim to second. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And we now move to business arising from the minutes, which I don't believe there is any, and 5.3 correspondence. Now, last month we were waiting on Perth South and Perth East to consider for additional information. They did consider, they chose not to give us a letter of support, and that's perfectly within their purview. So we did go ahead and send the correspondence to the minister with those who signed on, which is 97.3% of our watershed. Certainly a big part of that is great support from London and all the other communities. I think, we have the other correspondence here as well that, Mayor Morgan's willing to help us even more advocate for that. He's a very large sheet of the big city mayors. And so I think it's a very good thing that came out of it. As I travel around, there's a lot of support for the Conservation Authority out there, and there's a lot of information that is now being transferred. And I think a lot part has to do with the increased level of elected officials on this board and that information going back. And I think that's one of the positives. And that's one of the positives that was shared with Minister Smith when we met with him. I'm horrible with time, so it's probably 6-7 months ago now. In the fall, yeah. So it could be almost a year. Was that was a positive that came out of it, that we were getting that increased level of knowledge being transferred to our elected councils. Not only yourselves, but other members of council, I'm sure, sit on conservation authorities as well. So that's a good thing, and so that support was there. So I appreciate everybody's councils considering that and the support that was given, and hopefully that message will be received. And again, I talked to Mr. Smith at AMO, and he was more than happy. He was encouraging to get that information into them because they're going to make decisions obviously shortly with the new year coming. So we'll see where that goes. And then 5.3 as well. So 1.2. Obviously, it's always nice to receive good news, and that was certainly welcomed. And I thank the mayor for sending that letter. And it's certainly, we're all working towards the same goal. Again, having those elected officials on the board, and we have those increased conversations. That's what we can try to do to try to meet the goals of our municipalities and the Conservation Authority. And the more we have those conversations, the more we can try to get both those goals met. So, but again, I do appreciate that the letter coming forward and the information in it, because it's always nice to hear feedback from our residents, and especially our largest member. It's good to hear, and we look forward to working with Mayor Morgan and the rest of City Council as well to meet their objectives. With that, is there any questions, correspondence? Or is there, seeing none, is there a motion to accept the correspondence? Moved by Peter, seconded by Sandy. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And we will now move on to report for consideration. 6.1, budgetary and reserve policy report. Tracy, please.
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments to make about the budgetary and reserve policy itself, and just how much having a policy document will assist in the preparation of budgets. Certainly assist our staff in preparing the budgets and knowing our framework, but also further assist in our asset management efforts as we continue along to produce our asset management plans. Certainly Christine is here to answer any specific questions about the policy itself. But Sandy, as chair of the Finance and Audit Committee, might have some further comments to make too.
Yeah, certainly through the chair. I want to thank Christine and her staff for this. This is an amazing piece of work. I mean, we've come a long way over the last few years because of Christine's leadership in getting us to a place where, like other organizations, we have policies, we have ways of keeping track of our spending and our revenues. About this policy, the Finance and Audit Committee met and went through it page by page. and made a few changes, a few suggestions to it, but overall, I think the Finance and Audit Committee was quite happy with the policy. And again, pointing out on the last page of the report, the state of the reserves, particularly the Category 1 reserves, are not in really good shape. But this policy should put us in the direction of improving that and our other reserves so that we are a financially healthy organization going forward. So with that, I'll happy to answer any questions if you want to direct them to me, but Christine is certainly the expert.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Christine, is there anything would you like to add to that?
Only to elaborate a little bit on what Sandy just mentioned, the policy statements about how we're going to be budgeting in years to come should leave us at a place where our reserves, as they are today, are stable, not depleted. If we want the reserves to grow, that's another discussion altogether. That's the only point I want to make.
Excellent. I see Mark's hands up. Questions? Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I guess my question is that point number 4, where it says Category 3 campground operations budgets must be balanced and will likely evidence a project surplus. Does that mean in a good world, obviously, a certain campground would make money, but let's say, for example, Fanshawe makes a lot of money in 1 year and Piddock loses money that year for whatever reason. Would the reserve only go to Fanshawe as far as the extra dollars go, or is it spread evenly across all 3 conservation areas or parks?
Christine, please.
Yeah, through the chair, there's one campground reserve. All 3 campgrounds are treated as one function, one program area. Yeah, so we don't track reserves to that degree, although we do have the information about individual campgrounds and their performance each year, surplus deficit position, that sort of. But no, one campground reserve.
Excellent. Further question? Seeing none, is there a motion that the board of directors approve the budgetary reserve policy as presented? Moved by Sandy, seconded by Hugh. Discussion. I'll just reiterate what Sandy said. I think that by not having a policy before, we didn't really know where to go, and there was a lot of unknowns. And so this is a huge policy. This will, there's a lot of things on this agenda that are just would be the highlight of every a normal agenda, but this is another one that is just going to be so important going forward with the future of the authority to really drive the financial security and give the information needed. Know how do we get to how budgets are made and how reserves are done. And the great thing about this is, and this is the kind of policy I love, is that this transcends past our term on the board. This is a message to future boards that this is what we intended to have happen. And so not every year is it something to start again and something to start again. New staff coming in, same thing. There's that continuity there that will allow that message to carry forward. And hopefully 20 years from now, we'll be able to look back and say, okay, that had an effect that we wanted it to. It may change a little bit, but at least that direction is carried forward. So excellent to see this brought forward. And I certainly want to thank all the work from both Christine and the Finance and Audit Committee to get it here. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Yeah, 6.2, 2025 draft budget for circulation. Tracy, please.
We have a few things here. I'll be presenting a bit of an overview budget presentation. It's largely based on the preliminary budget that the board received in August, and that was circulated after as well. We've made a few amendments as well to our overall budget. And I point out that there was a correction in table 2 that was provided and updated on our website on the digital platform. But we wanted to make sure that that was pointed out at this meeting before we revise it and circulate it as well. We recognized just yesterday that there'll be another update to table 8 of the 2024 levy amounts. Were not consistent with the approved budget. This will be updated. So just wanted to note a few things there. Overall, for the preliminary budget, staff allocation has been improved to reflect time spent, and that's from last year's budget through this year. Last year, we were very much in a state where we were forecasting, but now with everything separated by categories and staff using our coding system to define what work we're doing in what program areas, that's really helped us to use data collected through that to produce more accurate budgets. Certainly the federal funding has been provided as well. And our plan is to add a few more additions after our discussions today, but I'll go through this presentation here, just so we have this provided. So that's a little bit of an overview. So the next slide, again, that's highlighting that these budget figures are going to continue to change over and be refined. It's still a draft budget. We go through our consultation with our member municipalities. We receive input back on that budget. We make additional refinements as well. Some of the project costs are constantly getting refined as projections are quoted, and we actually get some more discrete numbering from consultants or other project coordination contracts to put into our budget. We really focused in on input that we received from our August meeting, looking at the different alternatives and illustrating a balance for category 1 operating of programs and services. And certainly with that, and in doing so, it increases the municipal share of our mandatory category 1 programs. Next slide. Key messages. Really, our mandatory category 1 programs and services require that long-term stable funding to meet our legislative responsibilities. We recognize that there's very limited alternative sources of funding for these mandatory programs and services. In effect, that's approximately a 15% increase on the overall average municipal component for revenues for category 1 operating expenses. And that reflects in about a 57% municipal share of funding of category 1 expenses. So certainly there's still some fees that we receive and other grant applications and self-generated income that we support category 1, but that municipal share is around that 67%. This is again to ensure that we have a balanced category 1 programs and that we're ensuring that continued deficit budgets will not impact our reserves. Exactly what the theme was just mentioning. We don't want to see those category 1 reserves depleted any further. Again, this will lead to consistent, dependable funding for those mandatory programs and services, which is really critical to ensure that we can effectively deliver these services and fulfill our provincial mandate. Next slide, please. We did look at some alternative sources of funding, certainly recognizing that our member municipalities are continually having to absorb provincial downloading. We investigate partnership opportunities, other user fees, and alternative funding sources for all of our programs and services, but at the same time recognizing our planning and permitting fees have been frozen since 2022. This and everything will have a significant impact on both category 1 and category 3 programs. Is the large federal grant that we just heard about through Tatiana's presentation. And by having those category 3 programs and services and those grant revenues, there's overheads that we apply to help reduce those costs. Category 1 overheads are mandatory. So this is 5 years with perhaps another 5 years extension beyond. So that's certainly a source of alternative funding. We've had other considerations. Certainly our budgetary and reserves policy that was just approved will continue to guide development of future budgets. and enable more careful consideration of our reserve balances to meet our fiduciary responsibilities. We've committed to fair and competitive compensation in our draft budget with 3% increases in wages across the organization. And we want to make sure that we're not falling behind in our compensation for staffing, to retain staff as well. And the other component that we've considered in this budget is our requirement to keep our capital infrastructure in good repair. Many projects have been deferred for several years, or many years in some cases, as the provincial grant programs have not been increased for some time. So WECI, there's a cap for $5 million for all capital projects that are eligible across the province. So that's been very much status quo for some time. And we have a lot of capital in our watershed that needs that ongoing maintenance. Next slide, Amy. So what's included, again, it's that stability in delivering our mandatory programs and services at the current service levels. We've included that new federal grant. There really isn't any new staffing beyond what the federal grant requirements are, and that staffing's been fully paid for through that grant application. We certainly have rising wage costs related to inflation, and again, remaining competitive, reducing that risk of any escalating retention issues. It also is included a broader GIS activities. There's a need to move over from different Esri product, say, program. So that's a necessity as well, because GIS supports all of our programs and services. Next slide, Amy. This was the slide that was shown at our August meeting when we considered the alternative levy amounts highlighted in green, and that category 1 mandatory programs. At the time, the dollar figures remained the same, but again, that was stability in providing our mandatory programs and services, reduces the reliance on already low levels of reserves, and then overall meets our fiduciary responsibility for providing provincially mandated programs. Next slide. The other side of it is our capital budget. Certainly there's considerable capital work planned for 2025 to maintain our aging infrastructure. Our capital project costs have varied significantly amongst special benefiting municipalities. It's not distributed equally across the watershed. Those municipalities that carry more of a share because they receive greater benefit will see additional costs. We certainly have applied for additional funding to offset those capital costs, but and they have included any approved funding and updated project costs in this 2025 draft budget presentation. So what you've seen, again, the WECI program has changed a little bit. There's 2 years of funding, and with the capital projects list that's provided, we've forecasted out a little bit further than we ever have before onto 2027. So I point you in that direction too. A few things that next slide are also related are the budget communications. Circulated out the hard copy of a little tabloid, a 2-pager for a draft budget overview for municipalities. Highlighted in the middle here, it's kind of an insert where each municipality will have their own draft budget pie, showing in blue, the navy blue at the top, and the overall operating levy, and the piece broken out for how much the municipality is sharing in those expenses. And then also at the bottom, I've got a next slide that gives that a little bit more detail. But breaking out where those amounts come from, either from general levy or through special benefiting. And then a table on the side to the right of the screen, really getting a little bit more detail on the distribution of the levy amounts, but then also when it comes to that benefit-based levy, what projects are proposed, and a little bit more detail on the capital side of things. Certainly with the City of London, it's the London Dykes phases 11 to 13 consultation is a big part of the budget that's included there. The next slide, here's the example for London, for example, certainly showing the pie graph beginning all the levy in the portion versus how much is the general distribution levy fairly for London, significant amounts when you consider the cost of Fanshawe and Wildwood that are attributed there. Benefit-based apportionment amounts is quite small in relation to the overall cost. And then the London portion of the general distribution as well. And the London portion of benefit-based apportionment. So a few different things there. Speak to it a little bit longer. Really wanted to highlight that there are a distinct difference between our operating activities and our capital budgeting, capital project activities. So with that, next slide, if there's any questions. Sorry, my recommendation didn't get updated there, but certainly wanted to highlight the budget development schedule. This is part of the draft and we'll continue and request circulated. Approved for consultation purposes, I should say, and then circulated to participating municipalities and posted on our Upper Thames website. Now through January, where we'll be compiling that feedback received in anticipation of our February AGM. The board considers the budget for approval. So with that, if there's any questions, either myself, Christine, or managers in cases of specific program areas are happy to answer.
Christine, is there anything you want to add?
No, if the bar graph at the bottom, the City of London one, it takes a bit of time to digest what it tells you. But the idea was to reflect the city's portion of all the levy that was of the two types, the general distribution and the special benefiting, special benefit-based apportionment method of the total levy. So you can see in this picture, London's portion general distribution of all general distribution is their 64%. And in that second bar, the dark green, operating activities, general distribution is virtually all of the dark blue levy in the left-hand column. So relating the colors and the size in dollars of each portion can tell you what London is paying for.
So
little bit more
just
clearly
seeing
for
that, and I haven't seen the package yet because it's just that, is there a explanation of what each one of those descriptions mean?
No,
Just
not an explanation, just the name the left-hand column is all bits of levy that the organization has. No.
Sorry, what I mean is like there's all levy, which we know what it means. But then there's all general distribution levy. Is there a little thing that this says, this is what that means?
For municipal council.
For municipal councilors?
Yeah.
Those would just be helpful because again, having the board around, we deal with this. But having if you don't have that experience, there may be a chance for misinterpretation or misunderstanding about what that means. And sometimes just a little, this is what this definition means, may go a long way to help saving you answer a lot of questions.
We can add that, certainly.
So with that, thank you very much, because I think that is, that one stood out to me as well as my first thought. So that's very good. What I'll do is we're going to have this document till February. So as far as the numbers go, what we're trying to do today is decide, should we send this out to our municipalities for consultation? So I'd like to try to focus the questions on things around, if you have questions around things that you're not comfortable with around sending it out, because hopefully that will target that. And then certainly, absolutely, as you go through the documents and the budget, get those questions listed out and send them into staff over the next little bit so we can have those discussions. Everybody feels comfortable when we do consider it February. So Sandy?
Thanks. And that is kind of what I wanted to focus on, Mr. Chairman. And for you to staff, just to put out there some thoughts about what goes into the communication to municipal councilors in particular. And I'm glad to see it's going to be individual municipalities. Not to want to put an extra level of complexity on London, but part of London's levy is paid through the tax base, but part is also paid through water sewage rates. I don't know if that information needs to be included in the London package. So these are just things to think about in terms of communicating the message. I also think, when I looked very briefly at what you distributed to us, you do mention that operating costs are up by 20%. People are gonna jump that that's the increase in levy. So careful what you include in that overall explanation. It might also be helpful to mention that one of the big changes and one of the reasons for the big ask is that last year we had a $1.2 million deficit budget. And we've eliminated that. That's a big part of the change in what we're asking from our municipalities. I think it's also important to mention the impact on the levy, or at least in dollar terms, the impact on category 1 of what the free fee freeze means, in round numbers. And along with that, for other things that we can point fingers at the provincial government on is there hasn't been a change in the WECI funding for years and years and years. I don't even remember the last time it changed. Chris would know, but I'm not asking that today. I think it's also important to reiterate that there was a 50% cut in the provincial share a number of years ago, and that hasn't changed. There's no indexing of what was the remaining portion. And coming attractions, the clean water. Those costs aren't going to be indexed anymore. And they're going to be shifting to the municipality. So, and more importantly, our estimate for what 2026 change in the levy is going to be. That's in the document from Christine. I think it's really important to tell that to our member municipalities that, this year is ugly, next year is not so ugly. And lastly, and I don't know, again, I got mixed feelings about this. In the budget package, Christine points out that 2025 doesn't address the reserves issue, particularly in category 1. Next year, maybe, but that would change the estimate in the budget. So that's why I have mixed feelings about mentioning that piece. It may be more detail than counselors need, but everybody else around the table is a counselor, so I'm really interested in your feedback on those kinds of pieces of information for your colleagues on municipal councils. Have the things that I've said, do you think they're helpful? If you don't think they're helpful, let staff know. Let them know today. I'm not going to be insulted if you say, Sandy, that's a dumb idea. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions? I'll certainly agree with Sandy. I would say that your slide presentation up here was excellent because it's the same that we had last month about okay, this was a target and this is what these decisions made mean. And really, I think that's what we need to do to explain. The work gets done here at the board. Everybody's here at the board is locked in, and we're seeing this stuff every month, and so we have a lot better knowledge. But what we need to do is explain what's changing and why it's changing, because that's a really important piece there. Certainly for London, we received a letter from Mayor Morgan for the correspondence that we did hit the target that they were looking for in their budget package. And I think that's an important message to set, that we are listening and that we're trying. It was targeted at 30% in last year's budget. Now we're down to 15, because certainly that's not the only reason that happened. But that's cognizant of staff working and trying to meet the needs of our municipalities. But I agree. Why is it changing? What are we trying to accomplish here? Certainly, I think reserves was targeted this year by not having a deficit budget. That's the first step to try to get to a balanced budget. So again, explaining where we come from, where we're going, and why we need that 15% increase, I think is huge. As long as we can get municipal councils to say, okay, I understand what you're doing, whether they agree. I have a policy, a personal policy that is, if you can provide the information for someone to make a decision, it doesn't matter means you make the same decision or not, but at least they can make an informed decision. So if we can give them the change of what our rationale was and why we're doing that, they may agree with it, they may not. That's their personal item, and they should have that right to have that opinion. So, but at least we can say this is our rationale for doing this and why we're doing this. I think it'd be very effective because it was very effective at the board here. We saw those numbers up there of what those different change levels would mean, and everybody around the table is like, no, we need to go in this direction to be able to solve that. So that would be my suggestion is, and I agree with Sandy because when it comes to being very careful about the numbers we put out, not because they're trying to be misleading or anything, it's because people may not have the context to be able to know what those numbers mean. Those numbers on that presentation were very indicative of what we're trying to do and the troubles that we're facing and the direction that we're going. So, but overall, the budget is in line with what the board asked and directed staff for. So now it's just a marketing and a communications exercise and trying to get that feedback and being if people are comfortable and knowing what we're trying to do. But I certainly agree with the comments made by Sandy.
Well, I think the two scary numbers that are involved here are the 20% increase in operating costs. I think the explanation behind that is pretty simple, that that's directly related to the federal grant program that we heard about earlier. And so that 20% is being offset by the federal grant, and we're not asking municipalities for more money to cover that. And the other is the 15% increase in levy. And that's simply an explanation that we don't have the reserves to run deficit budgets anymore, that we've hit the wall on that, and whether anybody likes it or not, to fund this organization, we have to get the money from the levy because our options have run out. So I think as long as we can explain those two scary numbers, and I think we do have very legitimate reasons why those numbers are in there, I think that would go a long way to selling the budget to municipalities.
How does everybody feel about the specific, would that be helpful for your councils having that specific information go to each municipality? Jim?
Yeah, excuse me. I agree with all the comments. I think it'd be really helpful. I think if there's anything I can add is that I think timing is crucial because everybody's already starting discussions. So, you know, you may have to pick and choose which ones you think you might have struggled with previously and want to get to them early on or whatever. But I think it is important.
I think one piece, sorry, Paul, go ahead.
No, I just agree on timing for Jim because what I see across is councils, rather than doing their budgets in January, February, and March, are now doing them in November and December for multiple reasons. Better budgeting. So in the past, we would pass our budget and then have to sell it to municipalities as they discuss their budgets through the winter. Now we got to be ahead of the game by 3 or 4 months to have that information so that they have it when they're developing their own budgets. I agree wholeheartedly with Jim on the timing of it.
And Mayor Morgan's budget update is next week.
So the good thing is we are in line with what was requested, so that shouldn't cause too many headaches that way. The thing is that, and I think maybe the board's going to have more discussion on this and staff as well in the future, is the capital side. The operations side is, you know, we can look at that and we get more stable, predictable. There's just so much variability in the capital side and affects different municipalities in different ways. How does that affect their ability to make sure they have the funds ready when they get going? And so it's always difficult. Like Sandy said, WECI has not been raised. You know, you're now seeing everybody have to have asset management plans. And so maybe things that were missed are now coming to light. And so there's more competition for that money. And now we're going to have to, you know, there's another advocacy thing that municipalities can help us for, because if we can't get the funding to offset those costs, well, then that comes on the municipalities, and they can only be put off for so long. And you know, these are not cheap projects due to the type of infrastructure that we're talking about. So that might be something to take back to your municipalities as well. I know that staff is out talking specifically and ahead of time to municipalities to make sure they know what their obligations are. But this is a more challenging part of it, we can more predictably, or not we, staff can predictably see the future of the operations going forward and try to level that out levy wise, but capital is always going to be a big variable there. So I'm sure we'll be seeing more conversations of that in the future of how to deal with that, but make sure you take a look at your own capital that you're seeing for your municipality and have those conversations with your municipal councilors and staff to make sure that, you know, at least they're comfortable, they're aware of it. I know our staff are having those conversations, but some of them are larger increases just to the nature of the project. So, but I think you have to have those. It's the way it is right now. Paul?
And to what you just said there on the capital end, is it safe to assume that our staff has extensive consultation with municipalities on these capital projects long before it gets to this part of the budget? Our staff can identify capital projects that need to be done, but there's no point in putting it in a budget without that consultation long before, when you're talking hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on the impact on a municipality.
Yeah, through the chair, I'd pass things over to Chris, but certainly we have had a 20-year capital plan that we have used in the past to highlight what projects may be done. There's typically some flexibility about when maybe that project initiation has to done or something has to be completed, but oftentimes it comes out of dam safety reviews. And then the work required or highlighted in that dam safety review, it's put on that larger planning stage, but then the conversations happen. And I know Chris has been out to talk to a few of our municipalities so far, but still has to loop back on some others. Chris?
Right, we've had some initial discussions with some of the municipalities that have the capital projects of the water control structures. We still have a few to schedule and have happen. When we're meeting with them, we're looking forward, not just at the current year. So I think that speaks to part of what was being requested there. Looking at not just this year, but next year, and as well setting the stage for what we see coming up in the future. Not that we necessarily pigeonholed it into specific years, but at least letting them see the picture of what is coming. And that is critical when the municipalities are faced with some alternatives. You know, the continued maintenance of a recreational structure versus moving forward with a dam removal project as the key there. So we've got work to do in that regard. Changing staff at municipalities and on our own side have presented some very significant challenges with those ongoing discussions, and often we have to backtrack to get everybody caught up to the same level.
I think it's from a council perspective, you know, we're all working on asset management plans in our municipalities, but because these are not physically owned by the municipalities, they may be missed from an asset management standpoint. And so that's the conversation I would encourage you as a councillor to have with your staff and fellow councillors. How is the municipality identifying these responsibilities for the future? Because, you know, if you're not identifying in your asset management plan, and that might be the best part, but how are they financially thinking about the future, like if it was our asset, and putting money aside so you're not getting that big spike, because certainly they're going to be in the authority's asset management plan, but again with specific benefiting factors. Those are the kind of conversation that I would want to know is how are we identifying that risk going forward and planning for it. And I'm sure some are doing it better than others, but the more conversation you have, the less surprising. Further questions or comments on the consultation piece for this budget? Seeing none. Thank you, everyone. Is there a mover and seconder for the so that the 2025 draft budget report be approved for consultation purposes, and that the 2025 draft budget be circulated to participating municipalities as posted on the UTR website? Moved by Scotty, seconded by Peter. Discussion on that. I would say is like, again, if you have any recommendations, obviously that stuff will be going out, but make sure you get that into staff on how, you think your municipality would like to see it. If there's anything helpful, that would be appreciative because that feedback is valuable. None, all those in favor? Opposed, that is carried. We'll go to 6.3, which is UTRCA Administrative Review Policy under Section 8, with Reg 2124. And I'll turn it over to Tracy, but I know Joe and Jenna are here to answer any questions and highlight anything.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out that this is one of the documents I mentioned in the last meeting. Having been just approved at Conservation Ontario Council as a guidance document to assist with these administrative reviews and allow for that continuity between conservation authorities and how they administer these administrative reviews. Certainly, anything else to add to that or be able to answer questions? Joe?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to reiterate that the Section 8 policy is just an opportunity for applicants to dispute whether or not an application has been deemed complete or not. With the new regulation, timelines and processes, it certainly stops that process. So this is an opportunity, again, to argue or dispute those requirements, and consistent with the Conservation Ontario guideline Tracy referred to, they are recommending that powers be delegated to the senior administrative staff or the general manager. As the new regulation has a timeline of 30 days to render a decision. So that we can meet those timelines in an efficient way, it's recommended that that power be delegated to senior administrative staff. And that's why we're recommending that the delegation be given to the general manager as well as the manager of planning and regulations. And any requests for reviews that come in would be administered or handled through the regulations coordinator.
Questions of the report? Andy?
One question through you to staff. Does any of the industry reps had a look at this and you have any comments?
Through the chair to Sandy, no, we haven't taken it out for any kind of consultation. It's really an administrative process that's written into the regulation. It just kind of sets out some of the parameters around that specific requirement in the regulation. So we didn't feel that it was something that really required much consultation. It just provides more clarification for applicants about what the process would be if they choose to challenge that decision of a complete application.
Through you to staff, Mr. Chair, I just wonder if it just came back next month after you had a chance to talk to people like Mr. Wallace, just to help him inform his membership. I don't expect we're going to change anything specifically to this because it's coming from all the conservation authorities in the same format. But I think it never hurts. What's the expression? You can't under communicate a change. So would there be any negative implications if this came back next month instead of being approved today? Or can we approve it today subject to any changes that come back next month from discussions with industry representatives? I'm just trying to, I always think the upfront work is helpful in relationship building.
I get through the chair to you, Sandy. I guess we were pushing this through this month because we did have a couple of applications that are in the queue that we thought might go in the direction of challenging for a complete application. So we did kind of want to have this policy in place as soon as we could, so that if someone chooses to go down the road of Section 8, that we've got a policy in place to follow that.
So what I might move then, Mr. Chair, is that we adopt the recommendation today and have a part B that we ask staff to communicate to industry representatives the new approach and report back next month on any tweaks that are necessary.
Is there a seconder for that? You, okay, we'll go to discussion, but we'll certainly leave that open for questions as well. Further questions of the report before we? Certainly, I have a couple. One is, so under normal circumstances, we would reply within 21 days of receiving the first fall. So under the normal circumstances, if everything goes right, we should never have to use this policy. It's whether there's a disagreement, whether this comes in when there's a disagreement or not on the process. Does someone have to wait the full 21 days, or can this be initiated as soon as you say, if you get back to them within the 21 days, say day 10, and say it doesn't meet our policies, they can start this process right away. So is this process is designed to speed up any disputes? Is that the initiative of it?
I think without the delegation to senior staff members, if somebody decides to challenge the requirements for a complete application, we need to schedule a hearing. And because of that 30-day time window and then the challenges of scheduling hearings, that's really kind of the incentive behind delegating this to senior staff so that we can meet the timeline set out in the regulation if somebody does choose.
So under the current circumstances, this definitely speed up a dispute recognition.
Correct, yeah.
So that's good. I know that's a concern. So the second one is just from a personal policy thing. I don't like to see specific names in a policy just because it creates more work later on if someone leaves or changes positions. Certainly from I've had to deal with this in my own municipality. It creates confusion in the public if there's a specific email and that person's no longer there because it doesn't get through to the right people. So my recommendation would be to modify the policy just to be generic, and that would save time and effort later on. Still get the same results, but yeah. Unfortunately, if you do that with every policy, it just creates a lot of policy updates that to create. So that would be my only suggestion there. Other than that, I think that it follows the background of Conservation Ontario, and it describes a pretty clear process. I like flow charts because you can follow them, and hopefully we'll we won't get there. I know we've done a lot of policy stuff, done a lot of policy work prior that the board's considered to try to make sure that you get the submissions and everything that you need in the time frame. So hopefully that will be received. But again, it's always good to have this, and I believe getting into administrative level is the best process to be able to have a quick and fair resolution. Again, they're following policy, and then if I guess they don't agree with policy, that can be scheduled for a hearing. There's always that mechanism there. So certainly, I think that will address that. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none.
Read out the.
Please do.
Okay, so that the Board of Directors approved the UTRCA Administrative Review Policy as presented and furthered that the General Manager, Secretary Treasurer, and Manager Environmental Planning Regulations be delegated as administrative review officers with the authority's power for requests for reviews pursuant to Section 8 of Ontario Regulation 4124, and that the board asks staff to communicate to industry representatives the new approach and report back next month on any tweaks that are necessary.
Everybody still good with that? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, and we'll go down to 6.4. Does anybody need a break at all, or we'll keep going? I'm not seeing anybody say yes, so we'll keep going. This is my own caffeine. 6.4, land strategy and acquisition and disposition policy. Tracy, please.
Sure. Thank you, Brian, through the chair. We have Brent in the room and then Elizabeth online who are able to give a little bit of an overview presentation on some of the deliverables that we have before us, strategy and acquisition disposition policies. Our land. Yeah, having a hard time concentrating on that. Our Conservation Authority land strategy, and then our lands inventory.
Great, thanks, Tracy. Good morning, everyone. Through the chair, thank you for the opportunity to provide a summary of a lot of the work that's been underway for the past 12 plus months. Certainly want to recognize some key staff that were involved. Brendan Williamson, our land management coordinator, is currently up at the Conservation Areas Workshop, presenting and participating in the workshop. So he's unable to attend today, but he's virtually with us online. He led the many deliverables alongside with Kathleen Quinlan as well. Other key staff, Phil Sim, with respect to the GIS and the land inventory, the marketing communications team, the management team, specifically Tracy Innett, our general manager, as well as coordinators and all staff that had provided feedback and input. So thank you. I set out in the Conservation Authorities Act under the Mandatory Programs and Services Regulation, which we've heard about for far too long, 68621. The Conservation Authorities had two main deliverables. The first one being the Conservation Areas Land Strategy, and the second one being the land inventory. One of the deliverables within the strategy, the CA land strategy, was the requirement for CAs to develop acquisition and disposition policies that guides the dispositions and acquisitions of CA owned and controlled lands. Next slide, please. So the Conservation Area Land Strategy, there's the main components of it included here. Section 3 of the CA Land Strategy focused on two key areas: guiding principles and goals and objectives for the UTRCA owned and managed lands. So the guiding principles, they're not new, but now they're rather formalized. They're protecting the life and property, developing relationships with the community, providing recreational opportunities, environmental education, and collaboration. The goals and objectives of UTRCA owned and managed lands, as you see before you: environmental protection and natural hazard management. This is where we mitigate hazard risks to communities and protect the natural environment. Sustainable land management. This is where we strive to be a leader in landowner stewardship. Recreational opportunities in natural spaces. This is where we strive to meet current and future demands of our growing local communities. And finally, support UTRCA's, that should read, support UTRCA's strategic direction, programs, and services. So additional required components of the strategy include mandatory and non-mandatory programs and services provided and controlled by the authority, and the establishment of land use categories. And this is for the purpose of classifying lands in the lands inventory based on the activities that are actually occurring on those lands. The few other points is the periodic review. So the Act requires conservation authorities to undertake periodic review to ensure stakeholders, interest holders rather, and the public are consulted during this process. And last but certainly not least, public engagement and notification. Staff conducted over the past year 4 municipal engagement sessions, public surveys, engagement platforms for community input, and we brought forward a draft for board review. There was significant feedback in response to all of those various engagement components, which we've refined into the final strategy that's before you today. So as indicated, part of the CA land strategy included the requirement for the acquisition and disposition policy, and I won't get into the details. You've seen the document, but land acquisitions, we strive to align these with the UTRCA land strategy. The acquisition must support UTRCA goals and objectives, and it must contribute to the delivery and sustainability of UTRCA programs and services. Land dispositions, largely guided by the legislative framework within the Conservation Authorities Act. And some of that process includes staff reporting to the board of directors based on those guiding principles, goals, and objectives. And based on the feedback from the board, pursuing an inquiry reference plan and appraisal, pending board review and approval, we would then move towards partner notification, public notification, and reviewing all those purchases. One of the pieces of feedback that we received last month from the board was to include a flow chart. So that's been included within the document, which really kind of outlines the process of who and why and where and how we would dispose of lands, whether and how it was acquired through Section 39 funding or other. And finally, the notification to the Ministry of Natural Resources where applicable. So, and those properties that are brought forward for disposition, they were acquired through that Section 39 funding for 90 days prior to the actual disposal of lands. Please. The lands inventory. This is the framework of the lands inventory. I won't get too much into here. In the closed session, Brandon will be going through an exercise with specific land parcels to kind of go through those inventory fields and some of the optional fields that were collected. But again, some of those pieces of the inventory, parcel location, how it was acquired, whether it's going to be suitable for housing and housing development and infrastructure. But one of the key points, again, referring back to the strategy, is the land use categories on those lands. So active rec, passive recreation, management area, and the conservation administration area. The figure on the right-hand side of the screen there defines kind of what those areas are by area. The inventory also includes a review and updating of lands every 5 years, or as land is acquired or disposed of. So if we're picking up a property through the acquisition policies, we would then go back into the inventory and update that inventory, or if we're disposing of lands, we would then update that inventory in that calendar year. One final note on this is that it's an internal document and it's not for public distribution or input. In summary, the land strategy and the land's inventory and the acquisition disposition, they're all a multifaceted approach. They integrate conservation, sustainable land management practices, and community engagement. And there is an internal document, an implementation document that came of the CA land strategy. It's more of a on the ground to support operations level, but it's going to be guiding our property management priorities and initiatives at the staff level, as far as management plans and what work is happening on what lands and so on and so forth. In summary, just one last point there, the CA land strategy and implementation document, we all feel will be a very valuable resource for the Upper Thames, for staff and other interest holding regarding UTRCA's vision for our lands. With that, the board report included the CA land strategy and the lands inventory, which we can pause on any questions for the inventory until the closed session, but the acquisition and disposition policies as well. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions on the report? Andy, please.
I just want to congratulate Brandon, the rest of the team that pulled this together. I think when I saw the requirements that the ministry put on us to put together some of these documents, I thought, holy cow, are we going to get, the December 31st and having to ask for extensions? But you've done an amazing job too. I mean, here we are in October. And I just wanted to say thank you. It's a really good piece of work. I know there'll be changes as we move forward with it. But I also want to say, I think we benefited for the dues we paid to Conservation Ontario, because we didn't have to create this from scratch. They at least helped us with the template. And I think, again, that goes to, we're getting value for that money. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the report, please? Seeing none, thank you very much. Sandy took my words, but we'll get there. All right. Seeing no more questions, is there a mover and a seconder that the land strategy be approved and posted on the UTRCA website, and further that the acquisition disposition policy be approved and posted on the UTRCA website? George and Dean will go with this time. Oh, sorry, we'll go to Harsh. We haven't gone to Harsh yet. For the seconder discussion. Paul.
Echo the comments of Sandy on the great amount of work and the quality of work. But to me, this is all about asset management, and to have quality asset management, you have to identify what your assets are, and tremendous amount of work into identifying in a lot of detail 14,000 acres of land, which is a lot of assets in this part of the world. And then you also have to know what your options are to deal with that land going forward, whether acquiring more, just selling some of it, whatever. And then the third part is what's the procedure to carry out those options. And I think the documents that are before us do a great job of outlining all three components of that. What we've got, what can we do with it, and how can we do that? So great work around all the way around.
I certainly agree. And I'm gonna have some larger comments during the chair's section. But again, this is one of those policies. We're gonna be heading a strategic plan, that sort of document. But these are the type of ones that really allow staff to know the operations all these policies that we're facing today, they're gonna know about the operations, be able to form that strategic plan on where they want to go, and where the organization needs to go. So again, two big documents that are going to persevere through time and be very helpful tools. A lot of work, and it shows, but again, this is the start of a new era, I would say, of knowing where we came from and where we want to go. So I appreciate that work. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And now we have reports in cameras. The motion to go into closed deal with the cameras. Moved by Sandy, seconded by Scotty. All in favor? For discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And so we will get the process to go.
I think Hugh is the jinx. I mean, he's been on this board so long.
Okay, we are back in open session, and Michelle, you have a wording for a motion from our closed session.
On item 7.1, that the board of directors receive the UTRCA lands inventory report for approval as presented in closed session, and ask staff to report back in the first quarter of 2025 with report on options for parcels identified in closed.
Your mover second. Sandy moved, Scotty second. A discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. And
7.2.
7.2. Your motion to receive the report as presented. Paul and Hugh, discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. That takes us to report for information, section 8. And 8.1 is administrative enforcement, section 28. As always, Jen is available to answer any questions on the report. Are there any questions from members on that report? Seeing none, is there a mover and a second to receive the report? You, Jim, discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 8.2 is this project status update. Certainly after today, there will be some more items marked complete on there. I think it's one of those things that we really need to know. I really like this initiative, like this item coming forward. Certainly between this month and next month, we task staff with a lot to do this year, and certainly it's always good to see that visual representation of those things that are complete and moving forward, and then there's still to come. So we have to be careful how much more we test them coming up. So certainly if there's any questions of that, that would be happy to answer. Anything you'd like to highlight?
No, I was just gonna say the same. It would be nice to change the shading to complete on a few of those items and just recognize too that as the end of year approaches, we know it's busy. I mean, we've been doing a little bit of shifting with some of the reports. And the things that can be pushed off maybe till the first quarter, given the workload that we've got ahead of us.
Is there movement a seconder for information, receive that as information? Dean? And Jim, sorry, George? Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And now we'll go to 8.3, 2024 provincial planning statement, summary of changes related to conservation authorities. And staff like to provide any information on that?
Jenna in the back, so we get to meet her. I know she had a report last month too, but had to slip out for another meeting for being formally introduced. It's Christy Kent, our new planning coordinator, and provided this report.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So the report before you this afternoon is pretty high level. As you can read, it is an enabling framework that is being put forward by the province, and it's really intended to help the government facilitate their goal of 1.5 million homes by 2031. So that's a pretty key message when we're looking to read it, implement it, and interpret it. The most significant changes are really for our municipal colleagues, and as they start to figure out this new planning framework, we'll be there to support them and better understand. But really the changes for us at the CA are fairly limited. A lot of our specific policy directions are consistent with what's under the 2020, with the exception of a few changes to definitions. So there have been some qualifiers added, a little bit more specificity. And then there's been actually a few revisions that require watershed-based planning for fast and large growing municipalities such as the City of London, and other municipalities are encouraged. We do anticipate that there will be some regulatory and policy changes coming our way from municipal plan updates and zoning bylaw changes. And really, since this is a framework intended to spur development, we do anticipate that in the coming weeks and months, there will be an uptick in the number of applications we receive. We haven't seen anything, fast and furious quite yet, but there's a lot of talk out there. There's been a lot of press coverage, and we do anticipate that there's a few developers looking to start some pre-consultations under this new framework. So that's basically it, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions the board may have.
Thank you very much. Welcome. And I will open the board to any questions on the report. Andy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 2 in particular of the report, I think it's 135 of our agenda. There are things where it says municipalities are encouraged and large fast-growing municipalities, London, are required to undertake watershed planning. And then it has natural hazards. Planning authorities shall, in collaboration with conservation authorities. So my question and slash concern is sometimes we don't connect really well with the City of London on some of this stuff. How are we introducing them to these changes? Because they're in the CA Act. You'd expect them to know about it, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So how are we making sure that there are no surprises at the municipal level going forward?
Well, I can start off with that.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, certainly, City of London, again, one of our fastest growing municipalities, but really this entire region is experiencing change. But with the City of London in particular, we have been working, and Jenna and myself attended the Housing Task Force meetings where, again, that focus on a broader watershed has been explained. Jenna did a follow-up meeting about some of the regulation mapping updates and some of the changes to the CA Act, again, to increase that understanding. As well, we've been meeting with a multi-department kind of working team, including planning and stormwater and parks and recreation, or planning and parks, to again have more regular discussions about these changes. I think that's our constant theme with our municipal partners right now, is that we've all been going under changes either under the Conservation Authorities Act or under the Planning Act that are really altering past practices and speeding up approvals, but really the need to continue those conversations and that understanding about our programs, our roles and responsibilities, and then where we exist in municipalities and where we have shared responsibilities with the Planning Act deliverables too. So having those conversations that they've been starting, but now with the approval of the PPS and the amendments that have occurred from the 2020, we now kind of finally know what is the direction that this overall planning regime is heading. So having that certainly helps.
So more on a specific where it talks about the municipalities are required, London anyway is required to undertake watershed planning to inform long-term planning exercise. But we're doing a watershed planning strategy. So how are these kind of fitting together so we're not doing two separate things? Can staff speak to that?
Who wants to jump in on that one specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think just following up on what Tracy's already said, there's been a recognition at both the city level and our staffing level that there's a lot of issues, a lot of common issues and projects happening, and that we need more open communication. So I think there's been a commitment on both the city's staff part and our part to meet on a more regular basis. And, you know, depending on what the agenda topics are, we'll bring in, I mean, there'll be key staff involved in every meeting from both organizations, but depending on the agenda topic and what we need to discuss, we'll bring in other participants from both organizations. And trying to get those set up on a consistent basis so that we're talking about these things as they occur.
I'm hopeful. Thank you.
I would just add, sorry, I would just add to that is that, again, we're all elected officials, or we're elected officials, at some point. So again, those are things that you can go back and have discussions with your planning department and staff level and just say, hey, this is, you know, we're hearing this at the board level. We have to have this open communication because there's a requirement, or it just makes sense to be able to have those talks. How's that going? You know, and you know, maybe they planned for it, maybe they haven't, but again, we can provide leadership at that to make sure that we're saying we can get those dialogues forming. Once they get going, all the confidence of staff to be able to take that, to keep that going, but to support, to encourage and support those conversations happening. So this can be implemented as we go forward. You know, it's whether it's our planning department or municipal state planning departments, there's been constant change. And so all these updates have to happen, but the more we can collaborate and talk, the better. And I'm glad to hear that those things are happening. And now, so we need to encourage them. Further questions on the report? Seeing none, is there a motion to receive his information? You and Anna, please. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And we will go to 8.4, which is the 2025 rental house rates. I know we touch on this every year, and so we know about, we've had discussion in the past about the amounts and stuff like that, but this is certainly just for information that these are things are happening. So
Move it.
thank you. Moved by Sandy, seconded by Hugh. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you for that. 8.5 is the hydro plant update, and I will turn that over to Tracy.
Yeah, certainly, it's a complicating issue, dealing with this building as well as the hydro plant. I utilize the skills and expertise of external consultants. This report is a bit technical. Again, trying to rely on the same language that's the consultants were using to identify some of the issues. If there's any questions, I'm sure Chris can provide some responses to that.
I see Councillor Frank has her hand up, but she is also trying, there she is.
Hello, sorry about that. A couple things going on. I did have two quick questions I put in the chat. So I was wondering in regards if we've had discussions with Hydro One, or I guess my understanding from reading the report, which was well done but super technical, is we're at the end of a line, and that seems to be some of the issues that are causing some of the disruptions. So I'm wondering if we've had the discussion about trying to fix that upstream issue.
Again, those conversations would be with London Hydro. It's London Hydro that provides the service there. We started with them, actually, was kind of the starting point of the analysis to take a look at the voltage fluctuations. It's within their tolerances, but not within our tolerances. And it's complicated by the equipment that we have here, and the hydro plant, quite honestly, adds that extra wrinkle to it. So I don't think that's gonna serve any purposes at this point in time. That's why the recommendation from the consultant is to go with automatic voltage regulation on site to be able to protect our equipment from these fluctuations.
Okay, I might follow up with you on that if they were willing to make them less spiky, if that is worth the effort. But and then the other question was, is the issues of this hydro plant a result of the original design, or had it been functioning for like 20 years and then all of a sudden started to fail as time went on? I guess I'm not fully understanding when the issues started.
The issues are more pronounced, if I can kind of dig into that one a little bit differently, because of the sensitivity of the equipment that we have here. We would have been totally happy with what was going on if we didn't have equipment that was saying, hey, whoa, hold on, things aren't working the way they should. And that particular equipment, the UPSs, are what's protecting our very sensitive electronic equipment. And we want to make sure that it's not subject to those fluctuations and those changes. So yes, technology has changed. It's made us more aware of the problem. The hydro plant is, as it always was, the type of plant that has not changed. So it's load, if you will, and I'm probably not using that term correctly here. That part of it has not changed. So I don't know whether that kind of addresses most of the questions that the member had.
Yeah, I mean, through the chair, I don't think I fully understand it still, which is probably a problem, but it sounds like this is what staff are recommending as the way forward. So that makes sense. I guess my last question might be then as follow-up, have we looked to see if anyone else has like a hydro plant plus the electrical generator, and if they have had the same issues and what solutions they've done, or is Upper Thames completely unique in having those two things together?
We've worked with a consultant that we feel has the expertise to be able to provide advice on this particular situation. It's not completely unique in that regard, but we are located where we are located. We've chosen to develop our administration building at this same location. And that's the situation I think that we're presented with. So we're trying to offer the protection to our equipment that will allow us to get the plant back up in operation.
Okay, thank you for the answers.
And I know you have to leave soon, so thank you for that. I think I saw Sandy's hand, no?
Through you to Chris, the recommendation from the consultant was to put in the 2 automatic voltage regulators at somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 eventually. I'm just basing that on what the cost of the US cost was, by the time you change the Canadian and installation, everything, we're talking significant dollars. But the main purpose of that is to deal with the fluctuation that's coming off the grid. And if it's part of getting the hydro plant back into operation, that's kind of bonus. But this has to be done for the issues from coming off the grid.
If I may, Mr. Chair, the problem is there. And it's made worse by the hydro plant. So, you know, we have survived quite nicely for far too long, without the hydro plant running. But we are still seeing those errors, like they are still there. And they were observed and recorded by the consultant, in their analysis. But they're made worse to the point of not being functional with the hydro plant running. To put it into, I don't know, sort of clearer terms, we see the occasional message, you know, a few a week, maybe a couple in one day, maybe nothing for another couple of weeks of these problems. But when we run the hydro plant, it gets to the point where the hydro is not acceptable for our UPS. And it says, we're going on battery. And it stays that way for longer than we have battery. And so at that point in time, you know, the servers have no power. They just shut down. So clearly not an acceptable situation. It's definitely made worse by the plant running, but it's a problem that exists because of where we are. We're at that threshold, and then the plant just puts us over that. The plant actually starting up isn't that much of a problem, but what gets us so much closer to the threshold that when anything else happens, and it could be our own equipment firing up, or it could be something else firing up, or just demand on this feeder line, the way I understand it, that puts us over. So we need the equipment to be able to protect our own equipment, basically, be able to allow us to get things back up and running. And they looked at other alternatives, and the other alternatives are far more expensive, perhaps not as successful as this. So it seems like it's the way to go.
Remind me, through you to staff, when did the hydro plant get installed? 84? So in 84, nobody predicted servers, everybody having a computer on their desk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So of course it wouldn't have been a problem in 1984.
And it's not just computer equipment,
Well,
although that's my focus. You know, it's our computer equipment, but a lot of other
Sure. London,
technology has changed, right?
and London's grown in 40 years and we're still at the end of a line. And I don't see how that's going to change because I don't see London Hydro solving that problem for us. You know, unless we pay for some kind of fix. So I'm not even going in that direction today. All I'm thinking is, let's not count on the hydro plant being operational anytime in the near future. That's kind of what I'm hearing, Chris, because these will fix the hiccups we've been getting because of our location. They may not allow us to fire up the hydro plant in it may not allow us, but let's leave that for another day.
So what I would say to this is that technically this is, I don't know, well, maybe, I don't think there's any electrical engineers on the board. And so I can definitely tell you when I read this, it was way over my head. I do have a neighbor who is one, and so I asked him to look at it and explain it to me, and it quickly I'm like, this is not helpful whatsoever, because I don't understand what you're saying, you do. So, but what I do say is that the staff have hired a consultant that is supposed to be, they're giving us a recommendation in the report. So, you know, I think that hopefully this moves us, the goal is to try to get the hydro plant operational. That's always been the goal. And this is a step towards that. There's what I'm hearing from this, and there's other that could solve other problems. That's kind of my take on it, because I think if we're gonna have to go through training to understand this, we're gonna be here a while. There's a lot of different concepts at play. So is everybody comfortable with what the staff is saying, that this is the recommendation that they're going for, is that to get this, we have to go down, we have to do some upgrades to our equipment. Tom, please.
I'm comfortable with the recommendation. I just would echo what I said in the past, is just wondering if there's a cost benefit calculation here, like if we could figure out how much we'd be saving from in terms of how hydro expenses from the generation, then that might help with, you know, amortizing these costs.
Yeah, I'm sure that could be provided. My computer just died, speaking of power. Yeah, so staff could probably look at that. My understanding is it's not just a constant flow rate, because we're dealing with different rising levels. Is that correct? Or do we have an estimation of what the return on investment would be?
Yeah, that a challenging question to respond to in the time that we're given here, but no, the plant does serve us well in that it offsets our need to purchase hydro. You know, we've invested in that plant. I would make the argument that this particular investment is as much about where we're located and the equipment that we have here as it is about the plant. So it's an important step forward. And should allow us to move as expeditiously as possible, given balancing other priorities and workloads and demands and all those things, to get the plant to the point where it's producing again. It's in our best interest to get there. That does not put a number on the cost benefit, but the cost of what's being proposed here is not huge compared to the benefit of the long-term benefit of being able to produce our own power and not have to purchase it. Which if you look at it from the point of view of how much power we sell, that's only a small fraction of it. We also have to consider I'm struggling for the term here, but the expenses that we are not deferring, but are avoiding by generating power ourselves. So there's a number of factors there.
So the only question I have, and it doesn't have to be answered today, is certainly that if you look at where the line comes in, it goes along Kaleli Road. That's scheduled for development there. It's a long stretch if you keep following it. There's a lot of development on there. Certainly, discussion with London Hydro, like how are those new developments is that going to make our problem better or worse? And certainly if we have the generation capacity to offset that, that would be great, because then we won't have to worry less. But there is not a lot of hydro. You know, hydro is a weird thing. It's not magic. There's only so much capacity, and at the end, it's going to be, you know, it's one of those things in development that's probably in the background most of the time in planning. And so, yeah, going forward, I don't know if our problem is going to get better or worse, but at least if we have the ability to generate our own, that can offset that and maybe make the situation better. But any further questions or comments on that one? Seeing none, is there a motion to receive for information? Dean and Sandy, for discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And we will move on here to strategic plan update 8.6. And I will turn that over to Tracy for any comment.
Thank you. Yes, we've got the report that Teresa wrote before you. But also, just since writing the report, we've continued to refine the scope and timing of the strategic planning efforts with the consultants, Platinum Leadership, and internal consultations with staff have been done as well. So over the next couple of months, the first phase of our strategic plan will be to focus on refining our vision, mission, values, and guiding principles. And then consultations, again, more of an internal process of how we see that. But then consultations with municipalities, partners and other interest holders will occur in the new year. Again, focusing more on kind of our goals, priorities and those key performance indicators. So happy to report staff sessions are underway. And Board of Directors planning workshop is being proposed. So I'm hopeful that you could look at your calendars and let us know if there's some times available outside of our normal meeting schedule for your availability on either November 7th or 8th for a part day, or November 21st or 22nd for the better part of a day. So please let us know if you're here before leaving the meeting, or follow up as soon as you can. Michelle, send that out in a bit of a poll to confirm those times.
That would be great, because I forgot the dates already. Any questions? On this report? Besides, it's great to see this moving forward, and again, we have lots of things that are gonna be inputs from this into this process. Certainly we'll have outside consultation with community members as well.
Yeah, and that's actually ongoing right now as well through the watershed strategy. The two fit very well together because many of those priorities and risks are aligned very much with the strategic planning process too.
Is there a mover to receive this as information? Paul and Scotty for a second. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, and that is carried. And that takes us to section 9.1, which is finance and.
Thames River Current.
Oh, yes, sorry. Thames River Current, how can I forget that? Certainly always a highlight, and if there's anything anybody to highlight, besides, again, I'll give my message, sign up all your counselors for it. They don't need to give permission. Any discussion on that? Motion to receive the information. George, you? Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, and that's carried. All right, now we'll go to 9.1. Finance and Audit Committee, September 2024 decisions. Sandy, anything you'd like to highlight as chair of that?
No, happy to answer any questions. I think most of this was discussed when we did the reserve policy and budget discussion. Just to let the board know, we made no change to the fossil fuel portion of our portfolio. And we had a discussion about the audit plan with our auditors, and they're already at work, as I understand.
Excellent. Any questions on the report? Seeing none, the motion to receive this information. Paul and Dean, discussion? All in favor? Opposed, that is carried. And to the end of our regular business, so notices of motions. Sorry, hearings committee, we didn't have there's no update there, so there was supposed to be one after this, but it's been rescheduled for November, I believe, so we will deal with that then. Notices of motions, seeing none. Chair's comments. All I can say is wow. You know, we tasked staff with a lot of work this year, and it's got to be done by a deadline, and we're seeing it come through. So a huge kudos to staff, everybody involved. I think all our efforts are starting to get somewhere. You know, we're getting a lot better relationships, hopefully, with our members. We're seeing some pieces move forward and some initiatives move forward, and we're getting policy that's going to change the organization. And so from a governance perspective, I think that's the best thing we can ever hope for, is that we're going to see a better, stronger organization out of these exercises. We're going to see more staff knowledge as we go in the future, and talk about the strategic plan. That's all going to get wrapped up in a nice little bow and give staff a lot of clarity, and then future boards clarity about where we're going. And I don't think it can be said enough is that you know, we don't really do anything here. We get the reports, we read them, but staff have to do all the work. And so we certainly have a great one as they're bringing. I think next month's going to be just as busy as they try to wrap up those initiatives that we passed them with. So it's a busy year, and I think that it's one of those ones where we're going to have to look back and give everybody a pat on the back on this one because it's certainly not status quo, but it's gonna be good. Also, that Tracy and I were able to attend the Laternal Symposium in Vaughan, and certainly that was a lot of good sessions. I'll admit a lot of technical stuff that I was unqualified for, but it was some good perspective there on those different items, and certainly it's a great networking opportunity in that world to be able to see what's going on when everybody's working on the initiative. So certainly some good. Some stuff was way more out there on the theoretical scale than others, but yeah, it was good. There was lots of participation in that. I also got to participate on October 5th, the Celebrate the Thames event in Thamesworth. Paul was there as well, and so that was a very good event that had a lot of participation and tied nicely with Truth and Reconciliation Day as well. So they had that participation as well. So certainly as we move into budget seasons, not only here, but other municipalities, I know everybody's going to be very busy. It's that time of year that the schedule's filled up. But certainly want to thank everybody for the work that you're doing here. It's important, and we'll continue having those conversations with your municipal counterparts and staff to make sure they know what's going on here, and then we'd have that collaboration take place. But with that, I will turn it over. Oh, and once again, I do want to thank Dean again for chairing last time. That was huge. There's certainly running a hybrid meeting is one thing, and then certainly chairing one is impossible. So it's always good to have a good vice chair that's ready to step in, and certainly no problems there whatsoever. Yeah, I'll turn it over to members for comments. Seeing none, I will now turn over to General Manager Tracy.
Thank you, Brian, for you. Yeah, I was just going to highlight some of the same things that Brian touched on, and that's all of these deliverables. I think I've said it before, but yeah, we haven't necessarily like the timelines, but these are very important tools to set the stage for how we operate moving forward. Even the exercises of going through some of the inventory aspects, it's really helped, especially with so many new staff that we've had. Understand the history, understand the basis and intent for some of our approaches, and then to have things written down. I think in the past, we've always been doers. We've wanted to get out and do the tree planting, do the water quality testing. But Brian mentioned to have these documents to not only inform staff, but also inform boards and future boards moving forward of why we do what we do and why that's important for the watershed. So certainly kudos to staff as well. It's been a lot of work to really set the stage and provide those tools for everyone who's moving forward. Thank you.
Excellent. And with that, I will call for adjournment. Nobody? Sandy and Dean, discussion? All those in favor? We can stay. Nothing else to talk.
Think some of the